So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending NYSPEP's Fall 2025 webinar series. I'm grateful for everyone that could attend today. It would be fantastic on this Tuesday if everyone would enter your agency and title in our chat so we could determine the extent of NYSPEP's reach throughout our state. Our topic today is parenting education for the expectant parent, strategies for providing new parents with accurate information and trusted resources. Our host is Meg Akabas. Meg is the founder of New York City-based Parenting Solutions, a consultancy designed to help parents discover the joy in parenting, and the author of 52 Weeks of Parenting Wisdom, Effective Strategies for Raising Happy, Responsible Kids. She's been awarded the NYSPEP Parenting Educator Credential, and she currently volunteers for NYSPEP as well as NPEN to further professionalize the field of parenting education. Meg's focus is mostly on working with expectant and new parents and parents of infants and young children. What brings her to leading us in this topic today is her experience creating and teaching the newborn care and infant development class for expectant parents at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. I now turn it over to our presenter, Meg.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. I think it's afternoon. Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here with you. I'm going to start by sharing the that might be touched on during this presentation for anybody who is either working towards their NYSPEP parenting education credential or is thinking about it for the future. So jot these down. You can take a screenshot if you want. These are areas, topics that will be touched upon during this presentation, and some of this information might come in handy when completing your application. Our learning objectives for today are to first understand the climate today for new expectant parents, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are, because it's quite different than it was even 5 years ago, I would say. We're going to look at the touch points for reaching this population, what kind of information we want to provide, what kind of information they want to get, and where and how they can best receive this information, and to help them start to be on the path for obtaining information from reliable sources. And we're going to talk a little bit about helping them learn the difference between advice and information, and how to sort out misinformation, and all the things that are relevant in the current climate. So before I go into that first topic of the current climate, I want to just give a slight background about comparing, years ago to now, with my own case, which is how I got into parenting education, really, ultimately. When I gave birth, and my husband and I became very intentional parents. And one of the reasons that was the case for seeking out information was because the day after I gave birth to my first child, in 1987, a researcher from Columbia Presbyterian, Dr. Professor BB, came into my hospital room and asked me if I would be part of a research study that was looking at communication between mothers and infants. And this was a long-term study. I was to be part of the control group. They were looking at how that communication pattern was affected by a mother having either trauma or mental health issues, and what they could tell from that. So I was in the control group of people with the baseline, and I was brought into the lab several times when my infant was young. They did split screen recordings of me and my baby, which I now still have. And I got a lot of information from that research about the real complexities and what they were learning about what was going on with serve and return, and patterns of the parent and the baby being able to predict each other's responses. And that just got me so interested in all we could know. Did a lot of reading, took a lot of classes, and was something that I, over the years, became more and more obviously into as I had more kids and my kids got older. And because I was a young parent by New York City standards, my friends and colleagues who are having babies started asking me how, for advice or information. And I was sort of puzzled why everybody didn't have this information. Most people were just assumed to know what to do. There were classes that I took and others took, usually at hospitals, about how to diaper a baby and swaddle a baby and all those things. But there was no classes on infant development and how to parent, really, or things that will help you become the parent you want to be. So I came to believe that our best chance for good outcomes for children and families is dependent on helping parents be informed and intentional about parenting from the start. And all the research supports the importance of the first years of life. As you all know, it's our opportunity and imperative, I feel, to help parents get off to the right start. But my experience as a new parent way back when in the 1980s and 90s, intention from the start is very different from what parents are experiencing today. So on this next slide, I want you to sort of take a look at this variety of brands and names, logos, and let me know if you are familiar with these. You can go to a link that Michelle is going to put in the chat box. You can use the QR code. You can also go to slido.com and enter 3845353, and it will take you there. And you just answer whether you're very familiar with these, you know these names that are on the screen or these logos that are on the screen, or maybe you kind of heard of some of these, you're familiar with a few of them, or maybe you have no idea what these are at all. And I am going to share the results of that. What comes up? So it looks like, let's slide up a little bit here. It looks like many of you are familiar with these. And some have heard of them, but don't know exactly what they are. And some of you, I would say that most of you don't know what any of these are. Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. So these are all different products, apps, podcasts, devices that new parents and in many cases expectant parents use. So I can see that the most of you, or the highest number, is that not familiar with these, which is, I'm not surprised, but let's go back to the PowerPoint and I'll discuss. So I want to reflect on those because new parents, when they're pregnant, they find out they're pregnant or they're expecting a baby, maybe they're adopting, maybe they're going to IVF, they will Google, I'm pregnant, what do I do? Or where do I get information about pregnancy? And the minute they do that, the internet knows that they are expecting a baby. And what happens is they are now into a system, an environment where they are flooded with information, ads, products, and different ways to connect with the world of people who are expecting babies. So what these popular brands do, they are part of an industry called femtech. And some are free. So some people, anybody can afford them, but they usually have a leveling up where if you pay more money, you get more services. And some of them are extremely expensive, like this Snoo, which is a smart bassinet. And it vibrates and it makes noises and it's a swaddle in one. Many women, up to 50 million women, have used fertility trackers like Flow. And these are trackers that not only take you from trying to become pregnant, but then also follow your pregnancy. Week by week, day by day, they might connect you to other people. They might supply you with information. They show you pictures of what your baby might look like in the womb. Baby Center, which is a website that is one of the more popular websites with parents. It's an app and a website. It has about 10 million downloads. It's wonderful that parents have a wealth of possible support with all these products and websites and apps. But the problem is that many of these are businesses, and they are not always backed by evidence. There's a reliance on them by many parents to help them, but that can kind of take over into helping parents make their own decisions. They're just being told to do what to do, and it may not lead to their individual situation, individual family or baby or whatever the information is being given about or the product is meant to do. And so while I'm not poo-pooing any of these or saying these are not helpful for many parents, it's really important as parenting educators to know that parents are using these. These are really quite prolific out there, and we should be familiar with them to some extent. That guide them in, how to use them or how to look for ones that are more reliable. So there's also social media, which many of you probably have thought about as well. Expectant parents are going onto social media for information and advice. And an Australian study showed that 1,000 parents surveyed, 82% of them reported using social media for health information for their child. And so that's quite, startling to know that people are not necessarily going to their pediatrician or their doctors or people with scientific information, but actually asking other people online. Sourcing. Other thing about these apps and products is while they may be very helpful, particularly for parents who are feeling isolated in parenthood, either in pregnancy or with a new infant, who might turn to it for finding community, which can be very good for new parents, or information or keeping track of things, which a lot of them do. They distract the parent with a device, and it encourages, these devices are meant to encourage repeat use. So parents keep going back to them and back to them and back to them. And that we know can have interference with connecting with one of you. A new area of research and study about these apps and technology. So to zoom out a little bit now to include a wider look, a wider lens at the current climate for expectant parents, here are some opportunities. I want to bring attention to this first bullet point about the wealth of research and data and information we now have. It's just so wonderful that we know so much about what's happening, both in pregnancy and with newborn infants. The issue is about, how it gets out there, how it gets disseminated, and, sharing it in a way that's effective and doesn't get mixed up with misinformation. I had the privilege of attending just this past Friday a symposium at the Brazelton Institute. And the symposium was Touchpoint Centers, the Brazelton Institute Touchpoint Center, and had some of the legends in the field of child development. Jack Shonkoff spoke. He is the person who did the From Neurons to Neighborhoods research. Ed Tronick, who did the still face experiment years and years ago, was there and speaking. And they talked about these huge advances in early childhood in the last 2 decades, and that what we know now is that matters are 3 things: environment, experiences and exposure, individual genetic makeup, and then timing. We know that when things happen, when experience happens, is very important for developmental timing. We also know a lot of the things that babies need, such as responsive caring, rich learning experience, parenting education and support. And I was very delighted at this symposium to note that they did use the words parenting education. So that was really wonderful to hear. They talked about primary health, supporting sound nutrition, and economic safety nets. And we know that development, and we know this from research in the last 20 to 30 years, is all about relationships. That this serve and return between parent and child, between infant and caregiver, is so essentially important. And we also know that excessive stress can disrupt development. The two main takeaways that I took from this symposium, the first was that they're now looking at these three important aspects: genetics and environment and timing, in conjunction with community and how important community is. And there's a new initiative at Harvard that's called Connecting Science Plus Community. And I'm going to ask Michelle to put that in the chat box. And that is sort of trying to take this in the direction of not only making sure that parents have all this information that we now have about the science around infant development, but also that we provide the community that is also essential, that just that information alone is not enough. The second takeaway that I would say was my big takeaway from this symposium in Boston was that the science, and therefore the understanding about what's happening in the mother during the pregnancy and how it affects development of the fetus, has become much more important or known. And as Jack Shankoff said, it's not anymore really 3. We now know that it's really 9 months plus 0 to 3, that period before birth is actually important. So that's why this topic today is what I want to try to focus on bringing parenting education to, because there's a real need for making sure that we get there early on, both because parents are seeking out information earlier with these apps and these websites and podcasts and things and devices, but also because we know that that period is so important for the development of both the child and the parent. So while I used to say that, I was really interested and focused on parenting from the start, meaning from birth, I now say I'm interested in parenting education from birth. I want to mention about this second to last point here, an awareness of stressors and issues that parents face today. This is really, I think, a pretty recent development in parenting, in the parenting world, about how parents are under a lot more stress. It's much more difficult being a parent now, partly because of technology, but all sorts of other stressors. And Vivek Murthy, the Surgeon General, the prior Surgeon General, his report, Parents Under Pressure, which came out last year, really highlighted this and brought to the forefront that issue. So we want to be providing support and information earlier, and also set parents on the path of engaging with parenting education, so that it becomes universal, that we normalize it before birth. And I'm really focused now on bringing parenting education to expectant. So let's look at the challenges, having to said that, because all of that I listed on this screen, what it's really all about is developing a relationship with parents, and whether we can do that from the start, and the start being before birth. So the challenges to that in the current climate is that because there's so much information and evidence, it's hard for parents to figure out what's what. It's difficult for them to decipher it and to sort out what's really information and what is misinformation. Also, anybody has a platform. Anybody can go out there and say things, which they do, as we know. Also, parents feel a lot of pressure from social media about what they see other parents doing, about not being good enough, about trying to be the perfect parent. Parents are really trying to optimize, is the optimization. They want to do everything just right, collect all the data, get all the sources, and that's just kind of overwhelming and stressful in the end. These challenges don't make it impossible, but it's something that when we're thinking about how to reach these parents, things that are obstacles we have to work with. want to jump back just slightly to that femtech that I mentioned earlier when I had all those logos and brands on the screen. There's a recent book that came out called Second Life by Amanda Hess. It's part of investigative journalism, which is quite interesting and moving, and talks about her journey as a new mom and looks into the business of parenting, particularly through pre-pregnancy, pregnancy, and newborns, and what that's like for parents. So I do recommend that book. Once again, I want to say that I'm not putting technology down. Some of these apps are so helpful and reassuring. I mean, the tracker apps that help women to get pregnant when they want to get pregnant, to not get pregnant when they don't. I mean, there's really good stuff here. But the book lays out about some of the issues with them, and it's important for us as parenting educators to be aware that our youth, help them sort out whether the technology they're using is helping them, or is it causing more anxiety and stress? If you're trying to keep track of every time your child burps, or every time your child spits up, or the last time they fed, or all this, or pooped, for some people that's just like so overwhelming and just becomes a source of anxiety for them. For many people, that's helpful for them. They feel more in control. They feel more on top of things. So to try to help parents assess not only whether it's a reliable source and that it's evidence-based, but whether the technology that they're using is serving. So now that we've identified some of the opportunities that we have, which are wonderful, a really wonderful time to be approaching this topic, all those opportunities that I stated above. And we know some of the challenges. What are the best ways and places to meet parents? We want to, right now, people are going to the internet. They're going to their phones. How can we make that connection, that relationship in the prenatal period? And so these are places that parents are, right? They usually, once they decide who their obstetrician is, they now know what hospital they're going to be using to deliver. Some people have access to centers, health clinics. We have community centers. Also, don't forget about adoption agency. I've taught very specific classes for expectant parents from adoption agencies. They're waiting to receive a baby. They are so receptive to this information. They want something to do and to get ready. And it's very exciting for them, and they're so motivated. So don't overlook that as a place to reach parents as well. My focus is on reaching through the healthcare system, because for me, that feels like that people rest. For the most part, not everybody trusts the healthcare system for reasons, but we know they're going there. That most moms are going to be delivering at a hospital. They have care from an OBGYN, and that is a source that they hopefully trust and rely on. So we want to go to places that they are and places that they trust. Speaking of health centers, I just heard about this wonderful health center in the Bronx called Choices, where pregnant women come to talk about their experiences, to get checked, to talk about their birth plans, and have support groups. It's places like that that we can really try to reach new parents right from the start. I'm interested to know if anybody has other ideas about places to reach expectant parents. And if you do, please put them in the chat box. If anything's coming up, Michelle, just interrupt. I'm going to go on to the next slide. Maybe I can see.
Someone mentioned the WIC office.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Great idea.
Food banks.
Forward to that, food banks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome ideas. Excellent. Okay. Before I go into what content new parents want and what we want to do them, I just want to touch on this topic about that we all are dealing with now about whether to do things virtually or in person. I, at Mount Sinai, started teaching and I created the course, my Expectant Parent course, back in 2017. And when I started that course, it was an in-person class. It was a 5.5 hour class on a Sunday, an intensive workshop where everybody was together in a room. We broke for lunch. We got to socialize. We got a lot of hands-on experience. We got to go into groups to talk to each other. Um, that was wonderful. Then, of course, during COVID, thing went online. And it looks like that our classes at Mount Sinai are never going to go back in person. All classes we teach in the childbirth education department, including CPR, including uh, breastfeeding classes, all that are on that list, of which my classes included, are going to be virtual from now on. So I don't have a choice, but I do know that and the drawbacks of each of them and things to think about if you do have a choice, because I've done both, and I don't think there's one right answer. But some of the advantages of being in person with expectant parents is that obviously the facilitation is so much easier to be inclusive. You can really draw people in. You're working with parents who are either single parents or some people are in pairs, some people are not. You can have them do exercises in person with each other to talk back and forth about a topic, or do an exercise to get a partner. But if someone's alone, then they don't have a partner to do it with. Of course, you can do that on Zoom, but it's much more tricky to put people in chat boxes and to take your time up doing that. And it's not always smooth. You can cover more content really in person, I would say, because people have a level of threshold that they can bear being on Zoom and being on a computer. And we tried at first splitting up the class, that 5.5 hour class, into 2 classes on 2 different days. And we just couldn't get people to come to both. Like the scheduling was just too difficult. And so what we ended up doing was actually condensing the material. So I've cut out some of the material that I used to cover and some of the exercises that I used to do in class. So how much content you can cover is sometimes minimized online. There's also obviously that loss of connecting between the participants, which is such a parents especially. I saw such nice new relationships being developed of people who see you in the hospital. Our due dates are around the same time, and I live in the same neighborhood, particularly in New York, which people are so spread out. That ability to be together and make some connections about where people were and how they could continue that connection was so nice, and we don't have that at all. People are very friendly to each other on the Zoom in the class, and supportive, but there's nothing that's after they get off the Zoom, they don't have any contact with those people at all anymore. They don't have any information about those people. I don't even have contact information for those people. So it's a one-off, and you kind of lose them. And then, of course, the facilitator being able to read body language cues is so important, and to help draw people in who may not be participating, which is really hard to do on Zoom. So easy to do in class because we've learned how to do that with group facilitation. So those are the advantages and disadvantages of in-person, virtual. The in-person classes, I would say, the disadvantages of those are people getting to them. It's particularly in New York City where people would be coming from quite far distances and they're pregnant, and giving up a whole day, whereas online you're giving up only 3.5 hours. This was a full day on Sunday that people had to give up. So we do find that barrier of getting somewhere really increases our participation, that more people sign up for these classes that are virtual. So there's some disadvantage people might say about the technology, that not everybody has the technology, and that is true. Not everybody has a personal computer to go on Zoom, but 98% of people have smartphones in this country, and so almost all people can access a class online. So you really just have to weigh the particulars of your agency, what's possible for space, because some places don't have space. We now no longer actually have space to give classes at Mount Sinai. They've taken our space for other things. The other advantage of having virtual classes, by the way, for newborns, for parents of newborn, and for expectant parents, that there's no risk, the health ramifications of having people together in one room. um, are eliminated. And some people are worried about that. They don't want to be in a room with in close quarters with other people anymore, particularly in the winter. So that barrier is also down. So that's another advantage of virtual.
We got some
Um,
questions in regards to your classes, Meg.
yeah.
Um, Someone asked if you have that class as a curriculum that other organizations could use, and CCE, that was from CCE Tompkins, and they were also wondering if the classes were free.
Such a good, really good question. So the first one is that I do not have it as a curriculum for other people to use, but I am going to share a lot of my curriculum with you today. So you'll get that. And if you want to know any more about my curriculum, I'm happy to share that, but it's not something that I disseminate. It's the class that I created and use at Mount Sinai. And I will share the content generally with you about that. And if you need more information or want to know more of the details, I'm happy to share it.
Okay, there's
Um,
one more. There was one regarding the virtual.
uh-huh.
If you'd be able to facilitate sharing contact information if both parties were interested.
You mean in my classes?
I believe so.
No one's ever asked that in the virtual class. There just hasn't really been time for socializing. So I think that it's allowed. I am not. I give my Mount Sinai contact information, but I tell people if they have questions, they're actually supposed to go through my supervisor. And we're not, and I don't have anybody's email address. My supervisor sends me the names of the people who are going to be in class. She sends out the Zoom link that I give her, and so I don't even have the ability to share. So I guess if people like in a chat box asked each other, they could do that, and that's certainly up to them if they want to. But I've never had anybody do that or ask for people's information. I guess I could, and that's not a bad idea at the end of the workshop. It's usually pretty late by the time we end, and people have had enough of Zoom. But I could say, if anybody wants to share information, put your contact information in the chat box for others. I think that's probably not a bad idea. So I like that. In terms of the free, the class at Mount Sinai, I'm ashamed to say, is not free. So I haven't offer it for free. Some hospitals do have it for free. I believe that Mount Sinai should offer it for free. They do not. I think they do make some accommodations if people ask for it. In other words, if people let them know there's financial hardship, don't advertise that. So I'm not sure how many people ask. Any other questions, Michelle?
That was all that there are so far.
Okay, great. So what content expectant parent? I'll give you a minute to put that in the chat box. What do you expectant parent, someone who's now knows they're either going to adopt a baby or they're going to have a baby, they're pregnant, what do you think would attract them? Let's put it in the chat box. What do they want to know?
Someone put everything.
Everything. I mean, that in a sense is true because they don't know what they don't know, right?
Someone put
Um,
what to do when your child gets sick,
mhm.
caring for the baby, the unknown,
Mhm.
stages of development, what resources are available to parents.
Good. Yeah, reaction to siblings. This does come up, the
Yes.
sibling question actually doesn't come up in my workshop because universally the expectant parent workshop is first time parents.
Mm-hmm.
Very rarely will someone come back, and in this it's been someone who hasn't had a child in such a long time. They'll be like, I forgot all of it or whatever, and they only have an older child at that point, much older child, and so they're like, I'm going back to see if there's anything new developments, any new research that I should know about in taking care of child. But I would say, 99% of the people that take my class are first-time parents, so there's no siblings. Um, so what to do when you how to breastfeed, bottle feed when you're all alone. And my class, by the way, does not cover feeding. That is one topic that is not covered. It's a separate class, but that is definitely something parents want to know about. They want to know what's normal. They want to know when discipline comes in, although most parents at this point aren't thinking about discipline yet. They just think of their baby as kind of a lump that
Hmm.
can't really do anything yet, so they want to, and they're worried about how they're going to keep it alive is really their main concern. Um, they're really focused, Susan, you're right. They're really focused on physical care, and how they can best prepare. Absolutely. So there's a report from the um, from Child Trends that was commissioned by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation about exactly this topic. What do both new parents want to know, and parents who are about to become parents, about to be new parents, want to know? And it's a report from focus groups that were done. And right before and right after birth, so that period after pre and postnatal, parents really most want to know about baby care and health. That is the overwhelming. And on this blue chart, by the way, on the side is just places the parents get their information. So you can this sort of consolidate some of the things that we were talking about earlier. Um, and it's clear from the report that that the internet has kind of become the village where people get their information. But one thing that they found is people do trust their pediatrician, and they most trust their pediatrician and go to their pediatrician for information about physical development. When it comes to more of the fostering healthy social development, they tend to go to YouTube or Google or Pinterest or Instagram, and they Google how to blank. And they also, parents find that social support from Facebook and similar social apps. One of the main recommendations of this report to optimize the likelihood that parents will use the information on parenting and child development. And this is what they found from asking parents what they want that they can't get from the internet or other sources. And they said three things. They want clear and concise recommendations. They want it accompanied by examples of how to use it in everyday interactions with children or babies. And they want it provided in a supportive environment. So one that really empowers the parent, not telling them or not punitive about what they should be doing as a parent. And one that offers options and alternatives to recognize that every family's needs and preferences vary. And I think these are all the things that parenting education classes, either virtual or in person, can offer that parents actually have trouble getting from these other sources, particularly that personalized part of it, where parents have particular questions that pertains to a particular situation and experiences. Um, and so my experience in planning this class for Mount Sinai, when I first went to them back in 2016, I pitched an idea for offering a class that sort of supplemented the other classes, because there was already a class on newborn care at Mount Sinai when I got there. And I was dismayed that there wasn't anything about infant development and all the other stuff we need to know as a parent. And so I pitched this idea. They were thrilled, really wanted to offer it. We offered it. So I think it originally was offered as maybe a 2.5-hour class in person. And we didn't get many signups. We still ran the classes, but it wasn't as popular as the other classes. The newborn care class was the class that people wanted to take, because that was going to tell them how to take care of their baby and keep it alive. And what I found was that people don't know what they don't know. And so we strategized a little bit, and we decided to link the two classes together. So you signed up for newborn care, but there was also, it says newborn care and infant development, or newborn care and parenting guidance. We have changed the name a little bit over the years to try out different things, but basically that idea that there's all this other stuff about development and that about your role as a parent that I'm going to include in the next slides. I'm going to show you what I include, but all this other stuff that parents aren't thinking about, know that they need to know or want to know. And so we added it on. We didn't offer any classes that were just newborn care. So it was newborn care, and then people signed up for it because they wanted to get the newborn care, but then they got all this other information. And parents really were blown away. That I always ask at the end of my class, what did you most get out of this class? What was each couple and each person in the couple, if they're couples, what um, was most, made most of an impression on them or helped them the most. And, I would say 3/4 of the time it's the information that they didn't know they were going to get on infant development, or just watching the still face experiment video, or watching the interaction between a parent and child on a video, or watching a baby roll over and talking about it. Or it might be that other 25%, which says, it really helped me to just try putting on a diaper on this stuffed animal or this doll. Now I know what I'm doing. And I feel confident that when I get to the hospital and I have my baby, I'm going to know how to change a diaper. So parents are wanting and still needing that newborn care, but they're also getting a much richer, more full content in the class. So here's the topics that I was covering when I added this piece on the newborn care. And I had to learn some of these from making sure that I knew the protocols you have taught before. They are things you can teach. They do not need to be taught by a medical professional, but you do need to have information from the American Academy of Pediatrics about all these topics, which is what I have. And I took training on them, and I now know how to teach them. But these were not my intention originally to include these topics. I just included all the infant development parenting stuff. But these are the topics that parents say they want to know about. What's my baby going to look like? What should I be looking for? What if they see the rash? They have, newborns have rashes when they come out. So what they're looking for. But the procedures will be right after the birth. How to care for the cord. This is not that complicated, but it's actually changed because of research over the last, I think, 20 years about how to care for a cord. It's very simple, but it's different than previous generations. So patients should know that. And all these other topics here. 2 points. One is about this importance of parents getting current information and you being up to date about what is current. So for example, on the cord care, it's actually the recommendation is to do nothing, to leave the cord alone. And you don't give the baby a bath until the cord has fallen off. We talk about how long that takes and what it would look like if it was infected. And I show pictures of that, and to contact your doctor if it looks like this. But it used to be that the cord had to be cleaned with alcohol. And my generation, I think maybe slightly after me, that was still the case until research found that that actually wasn't the best protocol. So I say that in my class. So when there's been a change in protocol, obviously we do this with the sleep, right? We tell people, yes, we used to put babies to sleep on their stomachs. We don't do that anymore. But there are other areas too, like we don't use baby powder anymore. So I'm very careful to include that in the class, because if people have parents or people who are models for them who are from a previous generation that tell them to do something a certain way, they'll know that there's been a change in protocol. So that's one thing that's really important in this information, is to know what's the latest protocol. And you can get all of these. These are all things that are taught at hospitals. There are books about these, and there's the American Academy of Pediatrics. In the last bullet point, this medical care, I talk about choosing a pediatrician, and then about when the well baby visits are and how those are always, you always go to the well baby visit, even if your child is sick, and sees the doctor in between. And then I give the points about when to contact the pediatrician. I mean, the main point is to, if you're not sure, contact the pediatrician, but there are certain prescriptives about, if the baby has a fever and what that means, what is the exact amount at certain ages for what is actually a fever. And so I give all that information as well. I'm also very clear at the very beginning of class to let people know that I am not a medical professional. I am not a doctor and I am not a nurse. And they might ask me a question that is a medical question. Now, I would say at least once per class, someone asks, what do you think about this? And I am not allowed to give medical advice. So for example, if they ask me, when do you think it's okay to take your baby out and have other people come see it? I can't answer that question. And I advise them to ask that there are a lot of factors that go into that. But a lot of that has to do with immunizations and the baby's development, their age. And that's a really good question to ask your pediatrician. So I really warn them at the beginning of class that I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to answer any questions. So these are the topics that I added to the class, or these were the ones that were in my original class that I then added to the newborn care class, that take up about half the class. So I would say I spend about half of the 5.5 hours on the newborn care and half on these topics. For the parenting roles, I actually do a job description. I put up a blank job description form on the screen. We come up as a group with a title for the parent, a job description that says what their primary role is, and then what are their other roles. And basically, we're coming up in the end with the 5 roles of parents: nurturing, teaching, guiding, and communicating. But I have them come up with that themselves in different ways. They contribute to that, so it's a participatory experience. We talk about parenting styles and how it's important to really be thinking of that from the start, because babies are picking up on everything we're doing, and to also be thinking about family of origin. When I did the class in person, I would leave a little time for them to discuss with their partner or another person in the how they were raised, things that they remember about their upbringing, things that they'd like to carry on. Were their parents different styles? Were they the same? So we had time to reflect on that. We don't do that in the virtual class. It's just not, but I do encourage them to do it on their own. And then we get into infant development in the cognitive, physical, and social emotional areas with the milestones, with all the brain information we have about synapses and the windows of opportunity. So that's a large chunk of the class, and I use videos all know some of these developmental milestones. Then we talk about play and what that looks like, and I show some videos of that because people are like, how do you play with a baby? You know, that's not so intuitive necessarily. I'll tell you what I do around books because I have an exercise that I do around that. And then we talk about self-care and support, and then I give other resources and classes and places that they can find information. So that takes about, I would say this part of the class takes about 2 hours. And maybe, and then the other part of class takes about an hour and a half, and then there's questions and things that allows for the whole class time. So some of the areas that I want to elaborate on a little what I do. So when we did the class in person, Mount Sinai supplied the dolls. They had the dolls that they use in the hospital. Those dolls for use them for the safety classes too. I'm not sure, but we had a whole slew of dolls that we could use and that we got to practice on. We know that parents really like to practice. This is something that comes up every class. At least one parent will say, just doing it really made me feel, just really relaxed me, really helped me feel more confident, took away a lot of my anxiety. So we practice diapering, we practice swaddling, and we practice holding. I show them different holds and they get to try it. So because we have the class virtually now, we ask parents to bring either a baby doll or a stuffed animal to class or something they can use. I mean, sometimes people are just using a wine bottle or a water bottle or something that they can use to practice on. People come up with all sorts of creative things because not everybody has a doll or a stuffed animal around. So that's somewhat of a challenge. I ask them to bring a blanket so that we can practice swaddling. So that's, challenging to both show on screen and to watch people doing it and help them. But I do that, and I can I enlarge my screen so they can see what I'm doing. And then I watch them go through it and I see if they have any questions and they really, really appreciate that. Just trying it. Even I would say just holding is huge for them, like knowing how to pick a baby up. So, so that's a suggestion. I also use videos. So I use something when we talk about, for example, physical development. People want to know, how am I going to know when my baby's going to roll over? Because I'm being told that I can't swaddle them anymore when they're going to roll over because we don't want them to be face planted, face down in a swaddle because they wouldn't have their arms free to use. So I tell them, that you're going to see your baby when they're awake and they're on their backs playing, that they are going to start to bring a leg over and they're going to start to go onto their side. They're not going to take their first roll in that swaddle. It's too hard. You're going to see that they're working on that skill and you're going to know that you should stop swaddling them when they're sleeping. But I actually show this video.
This is how we'll pat the cat. That's nice. Does that make you laugh, buddy? Is he entertaining you? Two. Checking each other out. Whoa! Keep going, buddy. You're there. You're there. Keep going. Oh, yes, on tape. On tape. Way to go. Get that arm up. You got it. You got it. Can you get back? Man. Ta-da! Yeah, there it is. You saw it here first. Woo-hoo! Look at that. That was awesome, buddy.
So parents love seeing videos like this, their faces on the screen as they're watching, and they're really engaged. And then what I do with every video that I show is I discuss with them, what did you see? What did you notice about what the baby was doing, um, and what the caregiver was doing? Even if you can't see them, you can hear their voice. Um, and, I get questions like, how they notice, for example, that the father doesn't intervene. The baby gets kind of stuck. Always usually points that out. And then someone else might ask, well, how do I know whether to help the baby or not? How do I know whether to pick them up? So we talk about, well, this baby didn't seem to be in distress. He just seems to be working really hard, but he's not uncomfortable. He's not crying. He doesn't seem to be in distress. That the baby seemed to go into distress and seemed to be uncomfortable and crying, that would be the time to help it up, depending on the severity. So, we just talk about what we hear the dad doing, that the dad is narrating and cheerleading. And that they'll ask questions about it. And it's a really good jumping off point to use these videos. I use it also in the developmental stages video of interaction at 2 months, 4 months, and 6 months. This is the 6-month one that I show.
Kiss the baby? Who is that? Who is that baby? Oh, and kiss Ashton again? Oh, okay. Okay, you can kiss Ashton. So nice, baby. What? That's Ashton's mouth.
And I show these videos after I've already talked about the milestones at this age. And so we're observing. What I'm trying to get them to do is to notice. I mean, that's the big thing about parenting, is like noticing what's going on so you can make decisions and figure things out, because a lot of parenting is figuring things out. So I'm trying to encourage them to notice what's going on. So after they've already seen what the milestones that they're looking for, then I ask them, what do you see happening with this? What is this baby able to do? Well, she's able to sit up now. She holds her head up. She is interacting with the toy. She's making noises. She's imitating the caregiver's sounds. So we go all through these things, and I let them chime in on what they see and notice. I also show, I'm not going to show it today for time's sake, but I show some research. And one of the ones that I show is the still face experiment. So if you're not familiar with that, I do check it out. That's Edtronic's work from I think it was the 1970s. Mother disconnect visually or facially from the baby, so she has a blank stare, and the baby goes into distress because the baby's not getting the response they need. This is really very compelling for parents to see. It's upsetting to watch, but they know that it's in a controlled environment. There is repair, and it's just people almost always mention that at the end of class as something that really stood out to them, that they had no idea how important the response to the baby was. And then when I talk about toys, what I can't do now that I do virtually, but when in person, I would bring toys and I'd ask people to pick up one and talk about it. How might a baby use it? Why would this be a toy that's, engaging and appropriate? I also talk, of course, about safety with toys and all of those protocols. And I talk about the studies around electronic toys and how those are not recommended, and also about screens and babies, and how There are no screens recommended till 18 months, and some of the things that we know about that, and mitigating the effect of screens, both for the parent using them and the child. So I cover that in when I'm talking about toys. For the books, which is one of my favorite topics, I used to, when I did it in person, I would bring a pile of books, I'd put them in the middle of the table, and I'd ask each person or couple to choose a book, just grab one. And this is after I've already given some features of books for babies. And I'd ask them to give them a couple of minutes to look at it and discuss it with their partner, and then to give a mini book report to the rest of the class about the book. You know, what is attractive about this book? Why is it a good book for baby? Or what, maybe there's some reason that's not. How would you use it with a baby? Since we're not really reading to babies, we're sharing books. How might you use it? So that's a really fun part of class. I can't do that in the virtual class. I'm basically talking about the features of books, different positions you can be in to share books with your baby. And I do hold up some examples on the screen and talk about them and show them, like peekaboo and things that have textures and things that have mirrors, and things that are simple, not very many words on the page, things that have bright colors. So I go through all those features, and then I show them by holding them up to the screen. But it's not as good as doing the mini book reports, which they always really enjoy doing. Other topics that I cover are this resource list. Someone mentioned earlier, parents want resources. Yes. Making recommendations. I don't make a lot of specific recommendations about. I'm not allowed to recommend any products by Mount Sinai, so I'm not recommending any of those. But I do talk about sources, and I talk about identifying your support system before you give birth, and I have them practice making some decisions. Because decision making is a lot of parenting, and I have them practice identifying misinformation. So on the decision front, I don't do this anymore in my virtual class, but I did this in person. I would give them a question like this. I want you to think about this question, not necessarily have an answer right now to it, but think about how you would make this decision, because you're making hundreds of decisions like this every day about things pertaining to you and your baby. So you're going to have to make this decision. Part of this decision, I point out to them afterwards, is not made for you, because you need to bring your baby to their first baby checkup, which is usually about a week after they're born. But other than that, when do you take your newborn either outside or to gatherings or places, whatever. That's something I want them to think about, but I don't put on the slide because I want them to think about that. And I talk about the process of, what if you disagree with your partner or other caregiver possibly, or you just don't know the answer, where are you going to go for information? How are you going to make this decision? And we talk about that process. And if you have a disagreement with a parenting partner about how it can help to just ask the other person, instead of digging in your heels, to ask the other person to tell you more about why they feel the way they feel about this decision, and to try to get more information to make the best decision you can for the two of you. And then misinformation. Misinformation really comes up in class naturally. Inevitably, in every single class, someone will say something I heard, and then they'll say something, and I know that it's something they either saw on the internet or someone told them. These are just a few of the things. And I try to really, use it as an opportunity to say that's something that a lot of people say. That's not, I'm not surprised you've heard that, but actually research shows blah, blah, blah. Actually that might be true for some people, but it's not true for everybody. And so I really try to always find at least one opportunity in class, and it always usually comes up. One of the ones that comes up almost all the time now in the last year or two is when we're doing diaper changing. Someone will say, I heard you shouldn't lift the baby's legs up to put the diaper underneath, that it could hurt their back. When I first heard this, I was like, what? Never heard that before, but I didn't say that on screen. I just said, that's interesting. I've not heard that. I'll have to look into that. And I did look into it, and it's some video that came out of England 2 years ago where someone said you shouldn't do this, and it went viral, and now everybody thinks you should try and change your baby on their side. But I did check this out with pediatricians and nurses, and there is absolutely, some of the pediatricians laughed at me. They thought it was so outrageous. that there's no reason not to lift the baby's legs up gently. So that one comes up all the time. So I talk about these things when people do bring up misinformation, in a very non-judgy, non-shaming way. I to point out that this is something that a lot of people have heard or they've seen online, but actually it's really important to look where that information comes from. And if you look a little further, you'll see that that's actually not based on any research or science. And then we talk a little bit about advice and information. Again, this usually comes up pretty naturally in a class where someone will say, someone told me I should sleep when the baby sleeps, and I'll say, that's actually really good advice. That's advice a lot of people give, but that's actually just advice, not actually information. And it doesn't work for everybody. I mean, some people can't sleep during the day. Some people have other things they need to do. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why that might not be a good solution. It also doesn't solve the solution of the problem of uninterrupted sleep, which we know. So the quote on the left is advice, and the quote on the right is actually information. And trying to make that delineation to parents so that they start thinking in that way and start to become kind of detectives. And this is really good for them to know that not everything that they hear pertains to them, and not everything that they hear is based on science, and to be a little bit skeptical of what they hear and to do more research into it. What about neonatal support groups? Well, I think this is an area that we really should be expanding as parenting educators. One of the speakers at this symposium on Friday that I went to was from Columbia Presbyterian, where they're looking at a lot of the environmental and community influences on pregnant women, and its effect both on the mother and the fetus. And she was really saying how important it was for, we think of new parents needing community support now. I think everybody kind of acknowledges that, and I'm going to show some research around that, but how much pregnant parents or expectant parents, like adoptive parents, need that support. So once a baby's born, we want to keep that connection, right? As parenting educators, we don't want it to just be that one-off where they went to a parenting education class and learned about infant development, and then they go back and they're back getting lots of misinformation or overwhelmed by what they're seeing and don't know what to do. So we want to both keep supporting them and keep giving them information. So I have two ideas about that. One is something that's probably a little lesser known, and the other one is the new parent support groups, just talking a little bit about how to make those work well. But the first one is something that I have been trained in recently and was talked about at this symposium a lot because it comes out of the Brazelton Institute. And it's called the Newborn Behavioral Observation. And this is a system that was developed by Dr. Brazelton, who died fairly recently, I think, in the last few years, at Boston Children's Hospital at the Touchpoint Center. And it's a system where a practitioner, it can be a pediatrician, it can be a nurse, but it can also be a home visitor. It can be a parenting educator. It can be a psychologist. It can be any practitioner that works with families, has a visit with the family and the newborn, either at birth, going to be in the hospital, or anytime up to 3 months of age. And in that visit, they observe the baby together. And the key word here is observation. It's not an assessment. There is also a newborn behavioral assessment that pediatricians use that was also developed by Dr. Brazelton even before the observation. But he came to see that parents could really form a relationship with a practitioner if they saw the baby together, if they observed and noticed the baby's capabilities together. Again, it's not assessing, it's not ranking or rating anything. We're just looking, what does this baby do? What are they interested in? What different things do they respond to? The thing that's really nice about this practice is that it's individualized. It's relationship-based approach. It's all about forming this relationship between the parent or parents, the baby, and the practitioner. It recognizes the baby as a person from the start, and it's strength-based. You're looking at what are the baby's capabilities, because many parents are so consumed. First of all, they've just had a baby, and so that's a lot physically for them, and they're exhausted. But also, not, they're tuning into some of the physical needs of feeding, right, and burping and all those things, and keeping the baby alive and healthy. And they may not notice all these capabilities that babies have. They seem kind of like lumps, that don't do much. And if we point those things out, look, when you say your baby's name, they turn their head. I mean, it's amazing. You see videos of that, and it's just so wonderful. The research around the newborn observation systems shows that parents felt they knew their baby better, they were more confident, they trusted the practitioner, and they felt closer to their baby. And this has been used in many countries around the world, even before it's been starting to be used more in the United States. And it really has so many benefits. I found out at this symposium because one of my trainers who trained me last spring in this observation system was there, and she works in New Jersey where they now have universal home visiting. Yay. I wish we had that in New York. But what she told me, which was wonderful, is that they are now teaching the home visitors this system of newborn behavior observation. Again, it's a very simple, short way of connecting with parents. It's so lovely. And, if you were interested in looking into it, Michelle can put the link in the chat box to newborn behavioral observation at the Brazelton Institute, and you can check that out. I'm going to show you a quick video of someone doing a part of this kind of practice, so that we can just get a little sense of what I'm talking about here.
So wait, what we call the oriented items and sort of how he.
So that's the practitioner on the left.
Voice, and I just see looking at him, he's just so incredibly alert and engaged and wide awake. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to forward him and have him talk to him.
Ruben, hi baby boy. Hi. Oh yeah, you can hear me. Yes. Do you recognize my voice? Do you recognize my voice? I'm your Ima. I'm your Ima.
Okay, so now I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn him.
And baby boy. Baby boy. Yeah. Yeah. You recognize my voice?
So she's positioned the baby with her head away from the mom. And then when the mom says the baby's, the baby hears the mom's voice, the baby turns.
Yeah. How you doing? Are you a happy boy? Are you a happy boy?
It's like really so attentive to that very familiar voice.
And the practitioner is pointing out how the baby's attentive to the mom's voice.
What you do, looking at just a face. Now I know I'm not nearly as interesting as your mom. But let's see what you do with my face and voice. You're making a poopy while I'm talking. Yes, you're multitasking.
That's very good.
Hi, Ruby. You're going to follow me all the way over here. Look at how you can do that. And you're actually trying to talk to me. Hi, Ruby. Let's go back over this way. Hi, Ruby. Oh, we're having a real conversation. Look at that. You are such a little person already.
So this is a system where there's 18 different observations you can make, but you're not going to be able to make them all in one visit. It depends on when the baby's sleeping or not sleeping and what's happening. But it's just a lovely connection. Oops, gotta turn that off. Video. I recommend, if you're interested in this, to check it out. And I don't do one-on-one visits with people, but I use a lot of this information when I'm in a parent support group, or to relate to parents in class about some of the capabilities of babies. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. There's one more thing I want to share before we go to resources and wrap up. Here we go. We were here. So the other idea for staying connected with parents after birth, and keeping them engaged with people who can give them information and support, are new parent support groups, which I just believe so strongly in. Some of the research, is so compelling, and there's a lot of it. Here's one of the studies that was done in Australia. And the key thing here that I want to point out is it's not just having group facilitation skills, which are needed, but also expertise in these areas about brain development and attachment and things like that, that parents want to know about. And this is another research study, some of the findings from it. At Mount Sinai, I just pressed for years to have it. They do not have a new parent support group at Mount Sinai. They didn't have one. I pressed for years and years. It's such a bureaucratic institution. It's so large. The only person that I know there literally is my supervisor. I don't know anybody else in the whole. And Mount Sinai actually is the largest employer in New York State other than the government. That's how big it is. So it's very hard to get anything done there. But I did finally, last December, get a new parent support group instituted. It's once a week. I lead it. It's free. Yay. The problem is they haven't promoted it very well. So what's happened is actually, because it's mostly been promoted in the expectant parent classes, like the one I teach, or the breastfeeding classes, or the childbirth class, is that parents who have not given birth yet are coming. So it's actually turned out to be more of a neonatal class and or prenatal class. And I am fine with that. So sometimes we get a mix. Sometimes we'll get a few people who haven't given birth yet and some that have just given birth. And that's also a really nice mix, actually. And I'm trying to get that group promoted more because I believe this is so vital for keeping that connection from those experiences that parents were hopefully going to start giving them more and more with parenting education in the prenatal period to continue that connection. The things that I do in the group is that I check in, I ask how things are going. We go around the group to everybody gets a chance to talk, and also to let me know whether they have any questions that I can discuss during the time. I usually talk about some topic that's predetermined, and then I answer the questions that people have brought up, and then I have some sort of closing prompt. And I usually have the closing prompt be something either about something they've noticed with their baby that week, or it could be about them. It could be like, what do you do to relax these days? When you have 2 minutes, what would be the thing you would do? Or what's your guilty pleasure when you have a few minutes alone to help relax you? So I have a lot of prompt questions that I use to close the group, which is a really nice way for people to connect. And these groups, when I get enough people in them, if they are promoted enough, are very successful and people find them so helpful. I ran a free one during COVID for a year, once a week, of new parents. And the parents said, there were 10 women, they just said it was their lifeline. They don't know what they would have done without that group. Does anybody have any other ideas for new parent support groups or expectant parent support groups that they use or are thinking about? Can share in the chat box before we wrap up here.
Do have a question about the group. Someone asked, how long is the group and is it a drop-in?
Great question. The one that I did during COVID was not a drop-in. It was people had signed up, and we did pick up some people along the way during the year, but that was a set group. The ones at Mount Sinai are drop-in. They do have to sign up for it, but they can sign up the day before or the week before. It's online, and it is free, and it's an hour. And I find 45 minutes or an hour is good. It depends on the number of parents. And by the way, I find that the ideal number of parents, because they ask me like, where do I want to limit the amount that people can sign up, is between about 8 to 10 people is kind of ideal for a group like this. But I do allow more signups because inevitably someone doesn't show up. So I usually allow a maximum of 12 and maybe 6 people show up or 7 people show up. So, but I do find that 8 to 10 is a nice number, and the hour or 45 minutes to an hour at Mount Sinai, it's an hour. These are some resources that I shared with parents if they ask me for where can I go for good information online. These are by not any stretch of the imagination, all of them, but they're ones that I do give out to people, and it depends on what they're asking about. But that Pregnancy Plus app at the bottom there is one that obstetricians say is the best. It's used worldwide. And so it's more science-based than some of the others and a little less commercial than some of the others in terms of trying, being a business. And then some of these I'm sure you're familiar with. And I like to refer people to the Parent Data website where Emily Oster talks about the research around a lot of the things that we know. So thank you so much for joining me for this. I want to know if there's any other questions before we sign off fully. And while anybody's asking questions, if you could take this QR code or the link that Michelle's going to put in the box to fill out a survey. This helps us immensely, and we do pay attention to them, so please do that. I also have the QR code on the next screen, but also to let you know that the next webinar coming up is Truth, Trust, and TikTok, Guide to Social Media. So picking up a little bit on something we talked about today, but please do go to this. And also, please follow us on Facebook. Be a member. If you're not a member yet, please do sign up. It's free. It just means that you'll get our newsletters and information about professional development and the credential. Any other questions coming up, Michelle?
None that I've seen yet, but I'm still waiting.
Okay. Thank you all so much for joining today. And I hope this was somewhat helpful for you and maybe inspires you in some ways to help reach expectant parents and get them linked into parenting education 9 months earlier.
We've got a lot of thank you, Meg, in the comments.
Thank you. Thank you for joining. All right, if there's no more questions, I think we can wrap up, and I hope to see you all on another webinar soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for attending.